Hello and welcome everyone to Quick Album Reviews. I'm the False Prophet, CJ Metal, and today I'll be engineering a review about The Adversary by Thy Art Is Murder. I figured since I haven't reviewed a Deathcore album in a while, and Thy Art Is Murder is releasing a new album in July, I figured I might as well review one by them. I am aware that Whitechapel has released an album this year, and probably some other Deathcore albums have been released this year that I don't even know or heard of, but whatever, I'll eventually get to that Whitechapel one soon. Well, maybe anyways. So, The Adversary was released in 2010, and it's the first full-length album by the extreme Aussie metal band. And I'll be honest, it's weird listening to this album after listening to their later albums. I mean, on this album we get a lot more actual death metal than their later albums, so it's kind of weird, but at the same time it's also good because their lack of death metal in their later albums I didn't really like, so this was a nice change. But unfortunately I can't say this album had the best death metal either. I mean, to be honest, this album definitely lackluster for me. The riffs aren't very catchy and the tones seem pretty weak. I mean, when you got CJ Mahogany on vocals, you gotta beef up the sound. I mean, this man can make growls that make a lion look like a house cat. But this album has the same issue I had with Holy Diver by Dio. You got a beast of a vocalist, but the music to back him up is pretty weak in comparison. I feel like it's important to match the vocals in metal, especially. Otherwise, it sounds off balance, and it doesn't really give you that full sounding album that especially I want and like. Now, I would have liked for the rest of the band's tone to be a lot fatter or thicker. This is honestly like a really good example of where the bass really could have like stepped up and made that happen, but unfortunately, that's not quite what we get. Now, of course, with every deathcore album, there has to be breakdowns, and usually I bash them because, I'm just not a fan of breakdowns. I don't know what it is. I mean, very rarely will I find a breakdown helpful or useful, and like I've mentioned before in an earlier review, that I think breakdowns are a lot better live than actually sitting down and listening to them on your headphones and stuff like that. But I will admit, for this album, they actually worked, at least for the most part. They weren't really overused, and they didn't really direct the album into a breakdown fest. But it's at the same time, it's a shame, though, that breakdowns would eventually go on to really define Thy Art Is Murder's music, instead of staying to their death metal sound like they did on this album. Now, I also want to point out the instrumental track on this album called Requiem. Normally, I'd skip over these instrumental tracks, mainly because I never understood why these death metal bands need to add them, besides really just padding the runtime. But I will admit, this one was actually really good, and it's probably one of the better ones I've heard in quite a while, to be honest. It's more of a melodic death metal track than, death metal or deathcore. And it was different, and it was actually really good, like I just mentioned. And it really made me almost want Thy Art Is Murder to do like melodic death metal instead of deathcore, because I could really see that track having some CJ's vocals on it, and it being really good. I mean, obviously, I'm never going to get a melodic death metal album from Thy Art Is Murder, but I think they could pull it off. I do think they still can pull it off, but obviously it's going to piss off all their fans, and they've already established themselves as a deathcore band, so I guess that's just a, a pipe dream. That's what it's called. When taking everything into consideration, this album's going to get a 7 out of 10 for me. Like I said, I can appreciate Thy Art Is Murder, at least initially, or their first album, sticking to their more death metal roots, but obviously as the albums went on, they definitely lost their death metal sound and just went straight to deathcore, which is a bit of a shame because, like I said, this isn't the greatest album ever, but I definitely think it's a lot better than their other stuff that would come out later. So that's all I gotta say about this album. Anyways, hope you're all having a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Make sure you tell a friend to like and subscribe as well. Alright, everyone, have a fantastic day.